Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Let's talk about something that has really been revving up my hassle factor. So in the last 2 weeks, I have gotten an inordinate number of prior authorization messages into my inbox. That is multiple electronic copies on just about all of my patients who are on GLP-1 medications, which as an obesity and family medicine doctor, I have lots of that. It's normal for these medications to trigger prior authorization. It happens all the time. But these are patients who either have prior approval and it's not due for renewal anytime soon, or we know that they don't have coverage. We've been paying cash for it. It's not a brand new prescription. But because I refilled it, I am getting, again, covered and not covered new prior authorizations kicked off. So this was probably 20 patients in the last 2 weeks, and the volume of that was crazy. None of these actually required any work. We did not need to resubmit the prior authorizations. I double checked, right? But as you can hear, just my ires, my hackles, right, were right up as I'm looking at this paperwork over and over and over again, right? And of course, there's consequence. And that matters. We're going to talk about this new term, the hassle factor, but we're also going to talk about the consequence and a way that we can help cope with it, right? In this instance, right, the consequence is that if we miss a prior authorization that's really, truly due for renewal, then that means my patient doesn't get medication. To be quite honest, with this BS going on, it also sometimes means that the prescriptions are actually being held up because the pharmacy thinks that the prior authorization needs to be done, even though we have proven that it does not. Why does this matter? This matters because more and more conversations are highlighting how often physicians are leaving medicine and what their reasons are. And a recent article, it was a repost of an article by Dr. Corinne Rao. The repost was by Dr. Tisha Titus. I don't know these physicians, but let's just say they're on LinkedIn. And it was citing the hassle factor as a leading reason why physicians tend to leave their jobs early, tend to retire early, tend to leave medicine. And I'll say too, tend to move from one position to another, right? Because the desire to relieve this factor is huge. What is going on? Now, let's dial it back. I was not familiar with this term hassle factor, and I agree with the original poster, Corinne Rao, again, who's a physician. I don't know her, and I don't think that she made up this term. I think it came from somewhere else that was citing it as a reason for leaving. But the bottom line is that although we could all identify what the hassle factor is, we also need to accept that it is an inadequate term. It is an insufficient term to properly capture what is going on, because it's not that these things are just annoying, just a hassle in terms of more work to do. It's that these things are stacked with also moral injury, also potential real harm to patients, and the volume of it can be massive. What do good people do? Very good, excellent physicians leave medicine because of the burden of this and the fears of not wanting to make mistakes that lead to real patient harm. Of course, we know that sometimes bad outcomes happen, and sometimes bad outcomes happen because of Swiss cheese errors, multiple different things, right, that led to unintentional harm, but real harm. In the instance of things like this, right, where prior authorizations, you can't tell if they actually need to be done or not done without taking the time to go back and prove to yourself that it did or didn't need to be done, that it had already been done. These things stack up on us, right? And again, the consequences of missing it can be very critical. Now, in this instance that I'm talking about, we are not talking about a life-threatening delay in medication, right? The GLPs do not have that burden on them. However, there are many reasons why we do not want them to be interrupted. But let's dial it into something that might matter more acutely, right? It's not common that we would need a prior authorization to blood pressure medicine, right? But sometimes an interruption in blood pressure medicine increases a person's risk for stroke. Sometimes an interruption in another expensive medication, like those used for chemotherapy or managing Crohn's disease, right, might result in real harm to our patients. If we look at, I'm blanking on her, Dr. Elizabeth Potter, who is the surgeon online who is talking about her breast cancer patients who might be asleep on her operating table, and the health insurance company is calling and denying their stay in the hospital while she is in the middle of operations, right? Hassle is an inadequate term to cope with the moral injury that is layered into this. And yet, we have to call it something. So we will use this because we can universally recognize what we are talking about when we think about this. I'm curious where the hassle factor is for you. Think about the flavor of medicine, right, that you practice. Think about the circumstances in which you practice. Are you in clinic? Are you in hospital? Are you in a mix of those two settings, right? What are the resources and supports available to you? What is the payer mix? And how does that influence the care that you do or don't have? How does that influence the resources that your patients do or don't have, right? All of these things matter. The types of frustrations that might happen in these different settings may be different, but they do tend to feel very consequential, and they do add to burden and responsibility that is carried by physicians day in and day out. And when we are carrying these burdens and responsibilities into and out of the exam room, the hospital room, layered on with trying to figure out what is going on with our patient, how do we diagnose and treat them? How do we cope with their emotions as they are negotiating illness or injury? And how do we cope with our own emotions dealing with humans who are under stress? This is a very real issue. And we can think about, there's probably a million different ways that we could reduce the hassle factor. I think in the instance with what I referenced with the GLP prior authorization, I think what is going on probably is increased AI or automated driven prior authorization kickoffs that is not connected to the original prior authorization because it seems so random and willy-nilly, and it was not happening before. I have to imagine that there is some new automation that is going on, and it is causing a dramatic increase in paperwork. I don't have control over that. I don't have the ability to simply call one human and get that fixed. And that is true of so many issues that we deal with in medicine, including insurance issues, including pharmacy issues. There are so many things that we could point to. What I do have control over is myself and how I manage it. I want to put out there, though, that this is not about suggesting that we just need to suck it up, because that is not what we're going to be talking about. What I am suggesting, though, is that regardless of how these hassles stack up for you, regardless of what we can do to help lower them, it is our responsibility to be able to manage how we feel, manage how we respond, and to get out of this place where we simply react, right? Very few good things come from us reacting to these hassles, but we can help ourselves by deciding how we want to respond. And that's the process we're going to talk through today. So again, just to make it very clear, we're not trying to gaslight ourselves into acceptance. We are trying to examine how we respond. So all right, technical difficulties there. All right, we are back. So let's talk about how we can start to take care of ourselves as we navigate these hassles. Again, knowing that it sure would be lovely if these hassles weren't here. And it is not our intention to simply say that this is an us problem, but also knowing that only we are feeling what it is that we're feeling, and we owe it to ourselves to feel better. So the first thing that we need to consider is practicing radical acceptance. Now, again, what we are not doing is necessarily agreeing that the hassle should be there, expecting that we are the only one who is going to be involved, and we're not also going to say that what's going on is okay. What we are going to say is that I can't just wish that this weren't happening. I can't stick my head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. And I can't just hope for better next time. What I am going to do is to see that this is happening and to believe it. I first noticed the prior authorization issue happening because it was weird to me that I was getting prior authorizations and I knew that a few of my patients had just had them, or we had started on the medication fairly recently, but we went through a pretty extensive process to try and get it covered, and we knew it wasn't covered. So it didn't make sense to me that the prior authorizations were being kicked off again. But as the weeks went on, I noticed this was a lot of this happening. And I was noticing on multiple patients, I was having to go back and look and see, oh yeah, no, the prior authorization, no, I wasn't making that up, right? It was covered or not covered. And we went through this process recently. It was unusual for me to be getting more and more and more prior authorizations. And of course, what happens when you don't complete them, because you know that they don't need to be completed, they send another one. And of course, the patient usually does not get their medication. What I need to do in that moment is first accept that it is happening. That is radical acceptance. I don't see it as a fluke. It's true, I don't know why this is going on. I have my suspicions. But I'm also not going to just hope that it wasn't happening and wish it away. There's a corollary to this, which is when people show you who they are, believe them. That is you radically accepting that this person's behavior is a reflection of how they are going to handle the situation, and we need to trust them. Extreme examples of that, right, would be domestic violence, right? If somebody in a romantic partnership hits the other partner, we aren't going to blow that off and pretend it never happened. We aren't going to simply say, we hope that never happens again. We need to see that behavior as a reflection of what that person is capable of and know that they are capable of doing it again. That is a tough position to take, and it requires us being just eyes wide open. But it is important because if we can't accept what is going on, if we can't see it, if we can't really understand that, yes, it is truly happening, despite me wishing that it was not happening, then I don't have the ability to respond to it. I will only continue to react to it, right? I'll see it as something that, again, is wrong, that shouldn't be happening, that I wish wasn't happening, right? I'll have the plan to stick my head in the sand. We aren't going to do that, again, if we are going to control how we react to it. So the first step is just accepting, yep, this is happening. This is a pattern. I'm seeing this happen, and I believe it's real. In my particular circumstance, I don't know why this is happening, but again, I suspect that, this is, again, sort of downstream automation. And if I can accept it, then I'm going to control how I respond to it. Although, as we're going to see, I'm going to take care of me first. So what's the next step? The next step is checking in with how we feel. So before I decide what I'm going to do about the situation, I need to know, what am I feeling about it? Why does that matter? It matters because having an understanding of what emotion is being triggered by whatever the thing is, right? Whatever the hassle is going to be important for how we navigate what to do about it. There may be something that repeatedly has you feeling sad. You might be grieving that some part of your career is not happening the way that you wanted it to. You may be grieving the fact that a relationship with a trusted colleague is not what you thought it was. You might feel angry that whatever the automated changes from the insurance company is happening. You might feel frustrated. You might feel resentful. You may feel like you're being targeted, right? It is important that we understand what those feelings are, that we can name them, that we can think about what are the thoughts that are connected to this emotion, right? We talk about that a lot, that our thoughts create our emotions, right? Our thoughts in response to a circumstance create our emotions, and that drives our actions. So in my example, right, the circumstance is that I'm seeing an increased volume of prior authorization requests. That is a circumstance. I can measure it, right? I can say, well, this is how many prior authorization requests were coming in before. And this is the volume now, right? I can see it's an increase. My response to it, my emotion about it, is frustration. Why am I feeling frustrated? Because I have a thought that this shouldn't be happening. I can look at these multiple patients and I can see, we already did this paperwork. We either know it's covered or we know it's not covered. And if they continue to send me paperwork every single month, I'm going to drown in paperwork. And it's paperwork that does not need to be done, right? I need to understand that I'm feeling frustrated, that I'm feeling angry and irritable about it, so that I can decide to do something different, so that I can choose to manage the situation differently and to take care of myself, because I don't want to feel frustrated and angry over and over again about this hassle. It is a hassle. I accept that it's going on, and I want to navigate it, and I want to respond to it and not react to it. So, naming what you're feeling. It may be helpful to sit and talk with somebody to sort of tease out the thoughts and the emotions that are going on, depending on what the circumstance is. It may be something more minor that you can handle on your own, right? When a patient drops off FMLA form, now that happens to me a lot as well, right? They drop off FMLA form. There's no prior FMLA that's been done. There's no explanation. Patient just dropped it off or sent it in. I don't know what's going on. That kind of thing used to drive me crazy because I felt obligated to complete it, but I had no information about what it was for, right? I don't feel that way anymore because I've learned, well, the answer is that they're going to have to schedule an appointment. And that is just the bottom line, right? So I've chosen how I respond to it. So it doesn't make me angry anymore if somebody sends it. It's just a simple, oh, yeah, well, they're going to need an appointment because I have no idea what it's for, right? This isn't simply a renewal. And even if it was probably appropriate to have an appointment, but that's all there is to it. We can decide how we're going to respond to it so that we no longer react to it, right? So that is a past circumstance where I have navigated that. And I'm not saying that I won't have to renegotiate that at some point in the future if there's, I don't know, some other way that they do it. If the insurance company figures out how to text an FMLA form to me for a patient, right? I can guarantee you I'm going to have to do some work to figure out how I'm going to respond to that one. But that's not the circumstance right here. So first, we need to accept what is going on. Then we need to understand how we feel. Again, that might include talking to another human. That's a great time to talk to a friend, talk to a coach, right? Talk to someone that you trust so that you can really understand what is going on for you. The third step is trying to decide then what to do next, right? If we understand how we feel about it, if we can see sort of what our thoughts are about it, then we have a chance to respond. I might need to decide that I need to set a certain kind of boundary, right? In the instance of the FMLA paperwork, right, the boundary is, well, they need an appointment. I'm not going to send the patient a message. I'm not going to ask them about it. I'm not going to have back and forth in the portal. They're going to need to set up an appointment with me if we've never talked about it before, especially if they're overdue for a visit, 100%. But chances are high, if they've never mentioned it to me, I have no idea, and I'm going to take an appointment to talk through what's going on and to complete the paperwork, because otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out, right? That's a boundary. What else might need to happen? Sometimes we're going to want to change our thoughts about something. In the instance of this paperwork issue with the prior authorizations, right, I'm going to need to probably not change my thoughts about it per se. I'm actually going to need to create a new kind of workflow where I specifically tell my patients that the pharmacy or something in the insurance system is doing something different that is kicking off prior authorizations. That patient is going to need to be more proactive in telling the pharmacy to get the medication ready. I don't know why this is going on, but I'm not going to repeat the paperwork. I know that. I will do my own system to try and figure out how to keep track of what is going on and when the prior authorization does actually need to be redone. But I'm also going to need to tell the patient, and I'm going to need to shift some of this to them. Now, do I love that? No, I don't. Do I think that I can influence the insurance company or whoever's kicking off this process? No, I don't. But if they're going to put some increased friction on me, I'm going to have to increase the friction back. And we're just going to have to see how that goes because I don't know how else to manage that. We need to decide what we're going to do in response to the things that are adding hassle. There might be a new workplace policy that is going on that you don't agree with. If you have done these steps, right? If you have accepted that this is what's happening, you have done the work of understanding your thoughts and feelings about it, right? Then you get to respond the way that you want to. I remember, and I've told stories about this, some of my response to my former employer's new policies was informed, intentional ignorance. That is, I chose to actively not participate in whatever it was. Am I recommending this? Not necessarily. Am I not recommending it though? Not necessarily. So I'll give you an example of this. There was an instance probably about 10 years ago where they decided that we needed to have more double books. And they didn't ask us about it because, of course, why would they? Why would anybody say, yes, I would love to have more double books. I would love to pretend that I can spend the same 20 minutes with two different people in individual appointments, right? I would love that. Just kidding. So they decided we needed more double books, and they decided that the best way to navigate this to give us, quote unquote, more autonomy was to circulate a sheet of paper every morning where each physician would decide where their double books were going to go in each half-day session. So morning huddle, this paper would circulate, and I got to tell, I don't know, I guess the front desk, where I would like them to double book my patients. With the fantasy of, that working out in the way. Of course, I'm not even looking at my schedule because I am at the huddle where we are all standing around staring at each other. Every day this paper circulated, and it just made me madder and madder because I was probably already double booked. I knew that the patients always came with far more than we could manage in the allotted time, let alone adding in new patients, right? All the feels. But one day I just didn't write anything down. I did not write down anything. And possibly on that day, there was something that I needed to go early for. So perhaps I knew that I needed to get out in time. I might have had, I don't know, a prenatal care appointment, something. But I didn't write down anything. The next day the paper circulated, I again didn't write anything down. So what I started to do was just to not write down any times that I would allow or, quote unquote, enjoy having the same day double book. Every day. Typically, I did not get double booked. No one happened to notice enough to tap me on the shoulder about it. I just would pass the paper from the person who passed it to me on to the next person. That is what I'm talking about when I say intentional, what did I call it? I'm not participating, intentional non-participation. Now, I knew at that point that it was very unlikely that they could afford to let me go. That was a little bit, I don't know, egotistical, I guess. But I knew that that was not going to be the reason why I was going to get fired. And I did not get fired, but that was not going to be it. And if things were really terrible, they would need to have a conversation with me. And that was going to be a conversation first before it was going to be some kind of a warning or write-up, right? I knew that there was going to be a process. I decided that I was fully accepting of that consequence should it come around, right? If a leader had tapped me on the shoulder and said, you can't not participate in this, then I would have participated, but they didn't. And I chose to continue to practice that. It lowered my hassle factor. Did I love any of it? No, I didn't. But that is what I'm talking about, right? Is that once I could get out of my feelings, and I knew I was very clear on why I didn't want the double books, right? And how it didn't seem like it was going to work for me because of the work that I was already doing. Then I knew that I could actively not participate. We will need to do that some of the time. I just don't see any other way around it. And we will have to accept that there can be consequences to it. But each of us is going to need to actively manage the way that we feel, actively cultivate healthier thought patterns that lead to better emotional states than simply reacting to everything that is going on. Because between the insurance companies, the pharmacy systems, the medical supplies, the staff that we interact with, difficult patient encounters, right? Our employers, we have to figure out how to take care of ourselves in this very broken healthcare system. So, coming back to this idea of the hassle factor and the way that the hassle factor is affecting us, what I'm not suggesting is that we simply brush past and Pollyanna our way through this. Not at all. What I am suggesting is that we need to be very clear on what is happening. We need to look at how we are thinking and feeling about the thing that is happening after we've accepted it, and then just decide how we are going to respond. Even if you chose to respond by leaving medicine or leaving your current job, you still want to do it from a clean place, from a place where you've stepped back to look at the circumstances. You've considered your thoughts and feelings. Hopefully, you have probably already taken some actions to try and fix things before you decide to leave medicine or leave your job. But you're doing it from a clean place because you understand why. You understand your thoughts and feelings better. You understand what you need, and you are out of judgment for yourself about that. That is a hard one too, but it needs to be said. We need to step out of judgment of ourselves for needing what we need. We need to decide that we are worth having our needs met, our wants met, and know that there are many factors stacked against us. But again, we want to make decisions from a clean place, and this is a process that helps you do it. There will continue, my friends, to be many, many, many things that we can put on that hassle factor list, and they're going to be big and small. We are going to continue to see new changes and old challenges bumping up on your every last nerve. And we will need to decide how we are going to take care of ourselves in that so that we can respond the way that we want to. I'm not here to tell you how to respond, but I know that if you slow yourself down and you really consider yourself in the equation, that you will ultimately come up with the best decision for yourself in how you want to respond, right? We get out of that reactionary state. We choose how we respond. I hope that this discussion allows you to unpack a little bit for yourself where you find yourself constantly struggling emotionally. We don't tend to think of ourselves as struggling emotionally, but I would say that a lot of us are so used to shoving our feelings down, to sucking it up and digging in, that it is very common for us to get to this place where we don't even know what we're thinking and feeling anymore, right? We're just doing. We will not find something better for ourselves without returning to this place where we can connect with the things that we're thinking, that we can understand our emotions, and we can come to them with more self-kindness and self-compassion. That is what I want for all the humans. That is the work that I and many other excellent physician coaches do as we are trying to help physicians navigate this very broken healthcare space that we're in. If you find yourself needing someone to help guide you, needing someone to help you unpack this, I want you to set up a call with me. It's free for us to meet up. It's free for us to have a little dialogue about what is going on in your life and what you are needing and wanting. You can find the link on my website. I'm happy to hear from you. and I look forward to talking soon. We all benefit when we can look at ourselves with self-kindness and self-compassion, but sometimes it takes someone sitting down with you and helping to open the door to those things. I can be that person for you, and I can tell you life is better on the other side. That's what I have for you this week. Like I said, go to the show notes or go to my website, which is www.healthierforgood.com, to set up an initial call with me. I can't wait to see you. Until next time, take care.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.